Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is releasing into a new reality. And it looks like there might be some processes that support our healing and dissolving of old patterns of of being that are less than productive, that limit our freedom. And we're going to talk about that today. So before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to get present. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So great to have you joining us this morning, and so great to have everybody else who's with us. And we're just going to take a couple minutes to get ourselves present before we embark on today's conversation. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, 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 welcome. So I have been thinking about the fluidity of reality. And this is based on literally thousands of sessions that I have done with clients who show up in one state or with situations that have been persisting throughout their lives, emotional profile kinds of things. And in the space of a session, oftentimes their experience is radically transformed. So what is the magic that is occurring? I'm calling it magic because that's the word we use for stuff we don't understand so well. But what is the magic that is occurring that creates these radical transformations for people? And I was talking with a client yesterday who brought up the fourth way school, Gurdjieff's fourth way school. And I was engaged for a short period of time in the fourth way school that was shepherded by, oh my gosh, by Carol Sanford. There we go. Sorry, morning brain. Anyway, what was outlined to me is that there were established three ways to reach into enlightenment. One, through the mind, transcending the mind, disciplining the mind, finding the rational pathway, I guess, to an experience of God. There's the body yoga, and the heart, and these different traditions that represent body, mind, and heart, essentially. Okay, I'm doing I'm destroying the content, the concept here, but the idea is the separation of body, mind, and spirit, from monk to hermit kind of thing. But anyway, the fourth way, the concept of the fourth way school, as far as I understand it, given that that's a limited understanding, just disclaimer up front, is that life becomes our teacher, living in the world, allowing our life to be our teacher. And that's very much where we come from, and I come from in the conversation that I bring, is how in every opportunity in life, life is teaching us and instructing us on how we can awaken. And part of that teaching that has been taught me and is being taught me, that I'm being schooled in the work of the core connection work, is that what we're looking at is an integration of body, mind, and spirit. And this actually occurs in the core connection process. And my thinking is that perhaps we can individually implement a process like this for ourselves that helps us dissolve blocks, dissolve pain, suffering, trauma, that enables us to move into freedom by incorporating these different elements. So the first tenet to work with is, if it's coming up to heal. And this can be physical sensations. We've talked about the intelligence of the body, and what if we use the conditions and the experiences, the visceral, embodied sensations as communications? What if we can relate to the body as an intelligence, as a teacher that is communicating to us, rather than something that we need to dominate, control, and rule? What if we can interact with the body as something that is one aspect or one dimension of intelligence that is contributing to our awakening, to our awareness, to our growth? The another aspect of this body, mind, spirit kind of thing, at least in the context that I work, is emotion. Again, if it's coming up to heal. If we get angry and we get reactive to something, that gives us an opportunity to look at whatever the trigger was and to use that awareness of the trigger and of the emotion to be a catalyst for our own exploration and for our directed intention toward healing or dissolving those triggers. And lastly is the mind. So when the mind in the core connection process is kind of a free association connection with our other than conscious mind, that brings forward symbols and connections that don't necessarily make rational sense, or that we didn't even know the connections were existing for us, but creating symbols or recognizing symbols that get generated. So in the core connection process, we start with this free association. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And then what's the emotion associated with that? And where does that emotion reside in your body? And oftentimes, what comes up is, well, what's an age that comes to mind associated with that emotion? And in that, at that age, what comes to mind in terms of the circumstance? Where are you? What's going on? What's the feeling? What's happening there? And then it's often a question of, well, what does that earlier self need? So we've talked about how timelines are really not linear. Good morning, Dido. Welcome. So good to have you here this morning. So we're talking about releasing into a new reality, and how this process that we're talking about of engaging the multiple dimensions of being enables us to dissolve the triggers that are often the foundation of a context or a lens through which we view the world. That's an overlay on our essential being. That's kind of a programmatic overlay on our being. And so when we allow for these symbols to come forward for us, these representations or memories, and allow ourselves to engage with those memories, not married to the recalled fact necessarily, but to intervene with those memories through what we call an imaginal space. So not imaginary, because it's based in something actual, and we're in sort of an altered state of potential and possibility in this imaginal space. We can interact with an earlier self. So if there's a child self who's feeling isolated and alone and afraid, maybe we can't rewrite the story. Maybe some people can. Some people have the facility to be able to rewrite an interaction. But oftentimes that's not as readily accessible. When I say rewrite an interaction, let's say there was an interaction with a parent in this imaginal space. Sometimes people have the ability to be in that space and say what they needed to say, or ask for what they needed at the time from a parent, for instance, or have a different interaction with the parent, and allow that parent to show up differently than they did. Some people can do that, and sometimes they can't. So what, or they don't have as ready access to that. So what they can do instead, oftentimes, is to show up as their adult self, to provide the support and the compassion and the understanding that that child self needed at the time. To offer a hand, to offer a hug, to offer consolation, to offer love to that earlier self. So then what the power of this process, the integration of these multi dimensions of being, our physical sense, our felt sense, is to say, okay, what's the emotion? Where does that emotion reside in your body? What is the sensation of that emotion? Now, one of the keys to this process is that it be experiential rather than academic, that it be experiential rather than something that we're analyzing or trying to make sense of, because this transcends our rational sense. Our rational sense is very much dictated by our conditioning. And this process transcends that. We can have the quote unquote impossible happen in this imaginal space. We can fly, we can have creatures appear and disappear, we can have dancing cartoon characters, we can have dragons, we can have whatever shows up in this space. And what often shows up is something profoundly symbolic. And we don't always, in the experience of it, we don't necessarily get the symbolic significance of these things that appear. So as an example, I was working with a client who was looking to heal something. And we had been talking about how they were kind of in a limited kind of medical model way of thinking about things. And this isn't to deny the value of the medical model. We're not going there. This is just saying that in support of our own healing physically, medical model or not, we have an ability to help, at the very least, to help with our healing. So what was amazing in this scenario was this person started out with a solid red cube with sharp edges, which then started disappearing. The edges became more transparent, and eventually this box became a wireframe, and then it became just sort of the lines of energy, and then it kind of blew up and became this field of energy. And then there were all these other machinations that occurred in this visualization that was guided by this person alone. And then we were able to say, okay, well, what's the experience? What's the emotion that arises? Where's that emotion in your body? What's the sensation of that emotion? As you're present to that, what's changing about the imagery? What's changing about the emotion? And by engaging these multiple dimensions of being and allowing them to work their influence on each other without directing that influence, just simply by virtue of being present and exploring whatever that original trigger was, most often gets dissolved. And we can call it healing, we can call it dissolving, we can call it freedom, liberation from the oppression that had been wrought by whatever that trigger was. And oftentimes what happens is that people experience a radically changed context for being. a much greater freedom because they have dissolved this constraint that defined their experience of reality. And so we tend to believe that reality is this fixed thing. That's how we live. Like this is the truth. This is what's real. And the thing that I can say is that through the course of thousands of these sessions, that it is quite clear to me how fluid the experience of our reality actually is. That we truly have the power to shift on a dime. That a new perspective, a new, excuse me, sneezing on the truth there. A new context emerges as we shed these overlays to the essence of our being. So someone who has spent a lifetime feeling not good enough, all of a sudden they're recognizing their worth. Someone who has felt suicidal every day of their lives for years doesn't contemplate suicide anymore. I'm using these examples from specific clients. I mean, like, these are things that happened. It doesn't mean it would happen for you necessarily in the same way. In fact, it won't happen for you in the same way. But the thing is that people's reality shifts. And I do believe that this is something that we can do for ourselves as well. Maybe not as readily, but by engaging these multiple dimensions of being. The thought or the symbol, and I guess the key to this process really is non-judgment and presence. So presence means not running off in a tangent about, well, what does this mean? And the last time I thought about that, it was about this, and then that situation, and going down that kind of rabbit hole. It means being present to what's there in terms of the representation in our body, the representation emotionally, the representation in our conceptualization, whether it's visible or whether we hear it or whether it's a visceral sensation. And being present to those sensations and sometimes representing them. So if there's pressure, I'll often say, well, is it coming from the inside or outside? And if you were to visualize the source of that pressure, what would it look like? People have said it looks like feet standing on my chest, or it looks like a hand squeezing my heart, or it looks like, it can look like any number of things. It can look like an anvil. It can look like a bird. Who knows what it looks like? But when you have the ability to allow your other than conscious mind to represent these things, those symbols have meaning for you. It's a way that your consciousness is communicating, just as the emotions are a way that your emotional body is communicating, just as the sensations, the physical sensations, are a way that your physical body is communicating. There are all these intelligences that when they converge and interact with each other, there's a synergy that occurs that allows for release. And we can take this awareness and this kind of practice into our daily experience so that when we experience an emotion, we can pay attention to it and interact with it for its sensation, for the associations that it brings to mind, to be present to it without judgment so that we can allow it to be a teacher. You know, when we have an experience, when we're triggered, we get to use that as an opportunity. Life is happening for us and through us rather than to us. And when we allow ourselves to pay attention and use those signals and those symbols and those communications, they can lead us toward our greater and greater awakening. And so that's the experience that I'm aware of in terms of what might loosely be related, or maybe not so loosely related, to the fourth way school. It's what we're looking at is allowing life to truly be our teacher. So Rosalind says, great explanation of the process. Haven't heard it outlined in that way before. Thank you, Rosalind. I don't think I have outlined it that way before. And I think that it's really important for us to know that this is available. I think that, you know, I want to more clearly codify the process that I do because it's super powerful. So I invite you to try it, practice it. It's not something that necessarily comes easy at first, and to remind ourselves that emotion is energy and to allow that to move through as energy that we don't judge, that we don't shut down. So there are nuances, and I expect I'll be speaking more about this because I think it's really powerful, transformational magic that we have available to us. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network's Facebook page and YouTube channel, as well as me. And the links are in the description. As always, it is a pleasure and a privilege to spend this time with you exploring the nature and the experience of being human. So until next time, so much love to you.